Australia's federal government has launched its first anti-vaping campaign, focusing on the threat of social harm rather than cancer to get the message across. The almost $70 million campaign will use advertisements across TikTok, gaming and other platforms to communicate the harmful impacts of vaping. And they're going to target more than their 3 million Australians that partake. Aussie's Health Minister Mark Butler says the aim of the campaign was to discourage vapers before they become too dependent. The approach has sparked a debate among experts whether a similar move could be effective here. New Zealand's Action on Smoke-Free Group, or ASH, said it was firmly against a similar approach, saying they supported vaping as a hard reduction tool, helping to lower smoking rates. They even went as far as calling the Australian approach as dated and reminiscent of a failed anti-drug campaign in the 80s, and it will do more harm than good. Now, co-founder of Vape Free Kids New Zealand, Charyl Robinson, disagrees, and she joins me now. Charyl, good evening.
Good evening, Leah.
So why do you disagree with what Ash said?
Oh, well, for a lot of reasons. We believe that a campaign such as this would be very worthwhile to have here in New Zealand, because some messaging for our kids around the harms of vaping is really well overdue. The prevailing message has been for the longest time now that vaping is less harmful than smoking, and for children that seems to be translating to this as a safe thing to do, and it's not the case. We've seen plenty of campaigns from the Ministry of Health, even containing videos with doctors promoting vaping as a cessation tool, and it makes no mention of any potential health risks from vaping. So this kind of messaging, we feel, has been dangerous, and as a result, we've got thousands of children now hopelessly addicted to nicotine as collateral damage from this push to use vaping as the silver bullet solution to smoking cessation.
Do you know what I think too, Charyl, is the fact that vaping has never been pushed as dirty or a filthy habit, which was drummed into us with cigarettes, was it? So it's almost like you just said, it's almost got that cool factor, especially for kids.
Well, they've worked very hard for it to have that cool factor. It's a very cleverly marketed product, and you know, this industry are not driven by a desire to get people off smoking. They're in it to make money, and it's insulting to everyone's intelligence for them to suggest otherwise. These products are quite clearly targeted at children. They need children to become addicted for the future success of their business. You know, sensible adults with a fully formed prefrontal cortex don't often make the decision to pick up a vape or a nicotine product to addict themselves. It's just not something that by and large adults do. So it's important to this industry to get them while they're young for the future success of their business. It's pretty crude thing to say, but I honestly believe that that's the truth.
So I remember when they came to New Zealand, and the government was very lax on any form of restrictions or rules. I think it took 2 years for really strong, so-called strong rules to come in. What do you think, what would you like to see besides the fact, you know, we're talking about this anti-vaping campaign, so you'd like a campaign to start, but regardless of that too, sales, where you can get them from, what would you like to see happen?
We're very clear about what we'd like to see happen, and it was actually promised to us by the National Party pre-election. So what we would like to see is remove vapes from general retailers, so that's your dairies, your supermarkets, gas stations, places like that. Reduce the numbers of SVRs, which is a specialist vape retailer, and implement a licensing system. So if you have less specialist vape retailers with people that are suitably qualified to actually offer cessation support, since that's what they claim to be about, if you reduce the numbers, license them, make them apply for a license, you'd then have a far more manageable number of stores for our enforcement officers to actually act on license breaches. And it wouldn't take many stores to lose their license for the rest to fall into line. and that would then, in turn, eventually reduce the demand. But Casey Costello is not interested in doing any of that. We've had conversations with her, we got a meeting with her, and none of that seems palatable to her.
Is that what she said,
clear solution.
Charyl?
Not interested at all. We had a meeting which we pushed and pushed to get her to tell us whether she was interested in entertaining keeping the election promise that was made by the National Party to reduce retailers down to 600. We eventually got her to agree that that's not something that was on the table. It was really clear to us that the needs of people giving up smoking and the convenience of smokers having carte blanche access to vapes was a priority rather than access of vapes for children. It was very disappointing.
Gosh. So, yeah, I do remember now what part of the campaign was before the election. So they were talking, remind me again, they were talking about reducing retailers to, what was it, 600?
600. They were going, it was all modelled on the smoke-free legislation that was eventually scrapped. So one would have to assume that the handing of that portfolio over to New Zealand First was part of the coalition agreement. So we're really annoyed. The parents in our group are really annoyed. It's in the Health Manifesto, National Party's Health Manifesto, that we were going to have 600 vape stores and a lot of more manageable for our enforcement officers to get around, and instead New Zealand First have been allowed to trample all over that promise.
So there's nothing that Casey Costello, the minister, could tell you, Charyl. They're doing what? Bupkis?
She's all about enforcement, focusing on enforcement. But we find there is no need for there to be upwards of 8,000 places to buy vapes. Now, that's an entirely unmanageable number of stores for our smoke-free enforcement officers to get around. Those people are working damn hard. They're working really hard to try their best to get some meaningful things happening out there with these unscrupulous retailers that are breaking the rules left, right and centre. But it's just unmanageable. There's too many stores. And it's hard to have any confidence. I know that there's been talk about more enforcement officers on the ground being hired, but it's quite hard to have much confidence when we're seeing slash to the Ministry of Health staff, because it's a really tricky piece of legislation to actually understand, and they rely on those people in the Ministry of Health and the Vaping Regulatory Authority to actually turn their work into prosecutions. We've only seen one so far, and that person's hightailed out of the country and doesn't look set to see any consequences anyway. So we just see the only way that we can really start to make any sort of impact on this youth vaping problem that we've got is to reduce the supply, limit access.